Hey y'all, welcome to Waterbreak. We're on a roll, 3 shows in a row.
Number three.
We've actually thought about or talked about probably 4 or 5 times about actually starting our podcast together.
Oh yeah,
and
for years.
For years.
Yeah.
And we couldn't ever. We did one show together, and then it's family life. It's family. It's crazy. So,
yeah.
But if you guys want to be in conversation with us, you can actually email us, Renchmedia@gmail.com. Renchmedia. Don't put a W in front of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, people all the time put a W in front of it.
Not like
it's
the tool.
R, yeah. What it is like then? It's not like the tool. It's like
it's just
wrench
I don't
without
know
a W.
Else. Like it's just not like the tool.
Renchmedia@gmail.com. And also follow my wife on Instagram. Instagram a lot. She does. That's where she basically does all her posting and stuff.
When I post, that is where I post.
When she does post, yeah. So she's not on Twitter really.
No.
Barely on Facebook. You're a lurker. You're a lurker on Facebook.
Well, I mean, yeah.
I don't. Instagram's the way to go.
Not very active. Yeah.
So for this show, we wanted to talk about, where to start. Where to start as a family. Where to start as, maybe if it's just you and you're all by yourself. Where to start, but I think we're going to focus more of this conversation on families. But there should be a lot of you should be able to get out of it for yourself here too. I wanted to start off when we were talking last night about the show that. When you kind of start thinking about, eating healthier, maybe starting to do a little exercise or any of that stuff, you want to think about it in terms of like, I get to do this, not I don't got to do this. Pastor Wilson's got a great saying: it's a get to thing. It's not a got to thing.
Yeah.
And especially in the fitness world, and I hope this is kind of the tone you get from us on our show, is that we don't want like any of these things to be guilt driven. How you eat, how you look at food, how you exercise.
Right.
We don't want anything to be guilt driven. That's not a good way to do anything. And Satan loves to manipulate guilty people.
Yeah.
And so we want this to be kind of like a get to. Oh man, we get to do this. We get to go to church on Sunday, not a got to kind of thing. So, where maybe someone's just tuning in and kind of listening, and where does that family start? Eating healthier, fitness, and all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that's the question, right? And I think we wanted to address, in particular, those people who I assume is probably most of you listening, who are normal and not rich, And I think in our circles, in our Christian circles, normal people, moms, dads, are really, really busy. Like our lives are really, really full, which is a good thing. We're being productive. We're doing what God has called us to do. Yeah. We're taking names and raising babies and just doing all this stuff. But because of that fullness in our life, even the idea of trying to add in any change, anything on the side of health and fitness can be really daunting and
feels like it'll tip the glass is full and it'll tip the glass really and start spilling over.
And I think a lot of people, and I get questions all the time, again, just normal people, like they're not independently wealthy. They don't have a nanny in their house, normal people. They're just like, I don't even know where to start. Yeah. Like, I don't even know where to start. And I get that when you already feel like your life is a zero-sum game, which for a lot of us, it kind of is. Yeah.
There's only so much time in a day.
Yeah, right. And it's like, well, okay, what you just don't make dinner or just don't there's a lot of things that you do day to day that you can't just not do, So we wanted to kind of gear this conversation towards you guys because I think that's a really big challenge, And I wanted to, from the start, address a couple of the kind of roadblocks that I see people thinking or doing, when they're approaching this topic that kind of sabotages them. And the first one is just overwhelm. And I think this applies to moms more so than dads, although I'm sure it can happen. I'm sure there are plenty of men who are like, I'm legit.
I got too much going on.
Yeah, exactly. But I just talk to a lot of moms who are almost in a constant state of overwhelm as it is, just homeschooling kids, sports, making dinner, getting up with the baby, it's a legit full-time, physical, very emotionally, mentally, physically challenging job. So I think sometimes when I'm talking to that mom,
right.
one of the issues that she runs into is she just gets this almost paralyzing sensation of overwhelm if we even talk about, say the H word, health,
right.
or any exercise or anything. And while I understand that, it's something to be aware of, because I think, number one, we're going to talk about some very small practical starting points here in a little bit. So hopefully that will help with the overwhelm. But also, we all need to keep in mind that overwhelm in some ways can be just a unhelpful mental habit.
It could be
right?
a spiritual problem, because especially
totally.
with women, a lot of anxiety creeps into everyday life, and you need to deal with that.
Totally, you do need to deal with that. So I'm not saying this to be condescending or to be like, you don't have that much going on, just get over yourself. You probably do, but if you're like, okay, I know I'm unhealthy, I know our family really needs to make some strides in our health. I'm gonna keep my brain turned on. I'm going to give all my worries to God. I'm going to think rationally, and let's try to come up with some solutions that are realistic for me, for my family, that kind of thing. So watch that overwhelm. Don't let it paralyze you to where you do nothing, right? Because there are things you can do, and we're going to talk about what those things are. Another one.
Oftentimes it might mean the husband stepping up. Just maybe.
It's
just
true,
maybe.
dudes. It's true. Sometimes your wife really needs some encouragement in that area. Just be like, oh, no, this is totally doable. We can do it. I support you. How can I help? That's very true. That's very true. Another roadblock that I see a lot of people doing to kind of sabotage any kind of change in their health or their fitness is that kind of go big or go home mindset. And I'm sure a lot of people can kind of resonate with that.
Kind of the New Year's resolution, mentality.
Totally, where it's like, I'm going to just start working out an hour every single day, and I'm going to, or like, I'm going to eat, And
the gym is full for the first January, and then by the time February, it's all,
I mean, and there can be a lot of issues there. Some people really do have issues with discipline or priorities or whatever, but a lot of times it's like, you need to not bite off more than you can chew at the start. And this is true with exercise. This is true with maybe, diet changes you might want to slowly implement in your family. You're never going to go, for the most part, from all processed food to all homemade from scratch food. Like making that, or even just defining that as what you would need to do to get healthy, you're setting yourself up for some serious failure, right? You got to start small. You have to start where you're at, where your budget's at, where your time is at, where your energy's at, where your body's at. And you've got to make small changes, because that's really the only way, for the most part. Obviously, there's exceptions, that you're going to be able to stick with this long term.
And there's a lot of wisdom just in any change that you're working on in your life, is to start in the shallow end and work your way out.
Baby steps.
When I've talked with a lot of people, even in theological transitions, going from
that's a good, that's true.
Infant baptism, or transitioning from believer's baptism to infant, or becoming reformed, stuff like that. It's like, take your time. The Bible says you don't want to be like the wind driven around, tossed to and fro. You want to take your time and theologically sort through these things in the same way as you make kind of, physical changes, dietary, food, or exercise changes in your life. You just want to be thoughtful, and starting in the shallow end is going to make things a little more long-term success there. And there's just a lot of wisdom in walking that out.
That's so true. It applies to every area of life, really. That's so true. Okay. And I guess the third kind of roadblock that I see for, again, normal, non-rich people who are not paid to be fit. One issue I see when I'm talking with these sorts of people is I think that, this is kind of an obscure way of looking at it, but I think people will get it. I think that our Overton window, if you will, of what normal, healthy food looks like as just a general people, needs to shift a little bit. And I think there is a little bit of that going on too, where you might suggest, as we're going to suggest here in a little bit, that we start shifting towards, for example, eating more whole, real food. For some people, you might be like, yeah, that makes sense. But for other people, when they hear that, they're like, that's insane. That's extreme.
How could I even afford that? Or how could I even?
Or just that is such extreme. That's what extreme health nut weird people do. When 100 years ago, or even less than that was not the case. That was what everybody did. You just grow your garden, and you know what I mean? And it doesn't mean those people wouldn't eat something, eat a treat here and there, but the window, the norm. How do you define the Overton window? Because it's a political term originally.
It's just kind of
just for people who don't know what that is.
What's acceptable in the public sphere, what's acceptable in society.
Right.
You have this bandwidth of what's acceptable. And once you get outside that, this happens in cancel culture. Once you get outside that, it's just not acceptable anymore.
Right.
And one of the things that I think I like talking about the Overton window because I mean that's kind of what Moscow is trying to do.
That's what
is we're trying to move.
Doug pushes the Overton.
That's
window
right, and you
like
have to push it to move it. That's the thing is it doesn't move unless you don't push it. And I kind of like that metaphor applying to food too.
Yeah,
because what's acceptable in your family might need to adjust. What's normal might need to adjust to be able to, I mean, what if you got a family that has, like my family, we have diabetes in our family.
Right.
So our Overton window is probably going to be different than the neighbor down the road.
I mean, that's a specific case, but that's very, maybe you've got autoimmune issues. And so it's like you're what's normal for you might look a little different, but I'd say just for the average Joe living in America right now, a lot of us, maybe we've noticed, maybe this has been something we've been aware of, maybe it's not, but that the Overton window of what's normal, everyday family food has shifted very heavily towards quite unhealthy, super processed food. And I think that it would help all of us if we're trying to make some changes in our health, if we were open to that window at least nudging back a little bit, to where we were even 50 years ago. So it's just something to think about because I would like to make the argument that suggesting to someone that they work towards most of the food that they feed their family or they're eating throughout the week, making the suggestion that you make most of that real food, whole food, should not be considered extreme.
What do you define whole food? What do you mean, like real whole food? Yeah,
so just really basic, like food in its form, the way that it came out of the ground, the way that it came out of the animal, out of the chicken, off of the tree. So your potato, your any kind of meat, your eggs, your fruits, things that we have not heavily processed, added a bunch of Franken ingredients to, put in a package so it will never go bad or go moldy, and put somewhere in the middle aisles of the grocery store, right? And in no way am I vilifying those foods. Yeah. I mean, we still consume some, right?
We have cereal Saturday mornings for our kids.
Totally. And I try to pick and choose which ones we use, and then just how much we eat it. But I just, again, I think it's more of a conversation about, okay, what are your ratios? Like how much of your food every single day that you're consuming, your kids are consuming day after day, week after week, how much of it is the kind of food you could grow in your garden, right? Versus the kind of food that you literally could put out on the counter and in 10 years, it will still not have mold on it. And there's a difference, right? It's all okay, but there's a difference. So those are kind of the big three roadblocks that we wanted to talk about. And then I guess we can kind of go into some basic suggestions at how to
So where do we start? So those are roadblocks. Where do we start on this?
I would say number one, and we got a list of a handful of things, but if you take away anything from this conversation today, this would be the number one thing. This would be the most impactful change that you could probably make on your own health and on the health of your family is slowly, emphasis on slowly, start moving towards eating more real food, like we just kind of talked about. And I'm going to tack on to this, just going to make it a twofold thing. Start increasing the amount of protein that you eat at every meal. Okay, so two things. Slowly start moving towards eating more real food, and at the same time, simultaneously, start increasing the amount of protein that you eat at every meal. For some of us, that means adding in protein at all, right? If you are eating cereal every morning or your kids are eating cereal every morning, maybe consider adding in or replacing that with eggs, for example, right? And then just in general, making your meals more protein centric. That is going to really help solve a lot of your health issues for a lot of different reasons. I mean, that's number one. And we can kind of talk about a little bit some things that kind of fall under that main point if you want.
Yeah, I mean, I just think of for like moms, I remember when our kids were younger, you'd go to school, pick them up, and you'd make sure they have a snack right there.
Oh yes.
There's nothing wrong with snacks. Snacks are good. Especially kids are growing, so they're constantly hungry.
They're a little different than us adults. And we're not supposed to be growing anymore.
I mean, Cash is almost 10, and that dude's eating, starting to eat a lot.
He's a growing boy.
He's a growing boy. But how would like some mom, if she's constantly giving her kids goldfish every time they need a snack? Yeah. How would a mom think through that?
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so number one, I think we're in this weird snack culture now, which is kind of what you were speaking to. And we were talking about this last night. What do we call it? We called it grazing, where people, kids in particular, graze all day long, and it's a very vicious cycle.
Almost like every hour they come and say, I'm hungry again.
Right,
you know?
And I think it's for a couple of reasons. I think one of the reasons that point number one here was to eat more protein, make your meals more protein centric. One of the number one, protein is important for everything, right? I mean, all of your bodily functions, we need protein, and a lot of us don't eat enough of it. But one thing that also is, it's your most satiating macronutrient. So what do you mean satiating? Satiating just means it helps you be full, as opposed to if you ate a bowl of cereal, you're gonna, because of what it does with your blood sugar, you're gonna want more. You're gonna be hungry. In an hour and a half, you're gonna want more food, if not sooner, right? Yeah, right. You eat a big steak, and everyone can kind of attest to this just from experience. Or you eat a big pile of eggs, you're full for a lot longer, and that's a lot due to the fact that your blood sugar is a lot more stable. So. One of the reasons our kids are snacking so much is because they are not eating enough protein at their meals. Some of that might be because we're not serving it to them. Other times it might be because you have raised yourself a picky eater. Yeah. And we can do an entire another episode on that. That's a problem. It's a problem when you have the picky eaters, because that's your fault, parents. It's not your kid's fault. And then there's just this vicious cycle, because also the snack food culture that we're in is like 100%, as far as I can tell, driven by those snack food companies, like the people that make the granola bars.
They got a snack size bag for everything.
And it's super, super sugary, yuck ingredient food that is very addictive, right? And so your kids love it. It tastes good. It fires all the right spots in their brain, spikes their blood sugar, and then they're hungry again, in a second. But
another hour.
But then you get this vicious cycle of like not eating very much at a meal, so they're hungry right after. So they eat a snack, and because of that, they're not hungry at their next meal. So you have all these
they don't eat a full meal.
Exactly.
And then after that meal, because they didn't eat the full meal, then they want a snack 30 minutes later.
So I'm not anti-snack, okay, especially for kids. And like you've got kids that are working hard. They're getting up early. They're working hard. They have football. They have basketball. All these things. Like I'm not.
They need extra food. They're burning.
They're growing. They're growing and they're developing. So please don't think I'm anti-snack. However, I do think that helping them eat more protein at their meals will bring down their need to snack as much. And then when they are snacking, and this is another point kind of under our eat more protein and eat more real food, is if you can slowly start making, even in the snack category, some slow, gradual swaps. For example, instead of goldfish crackers, here's a couple of cheese sticks, things that are going to be more of a whole food, things that are going to be a little higher in your protein and even your healthy fat category. It's going to help your kids not come back for more or have such unstable blood sugar throughout the day. So even thinking about swaps you could make in the snack department, that would be awesome. And I'll also say this, one of the biggest pushbacks that I get from moms when I talk about doing this very important thing of bringing up protein, bringing up whole real food, is that it costs a little more money, which I would say it does. Okay. I mean, I think, Rice-A-Roni, Hamburger Helper, mac and cheese. I mean, there's a reason a lot of families lean on that. It's cheap. It hits all the right kids like it. It's not fun fighting with kids or, having food wars every single night. It's cheap. It doesn't go bad. It's not, So I totally understand. But one thing is, yes, it is going to cost a little bit more money. But if you stop spending all of this extra money on snacks that you really don't need, the granola bars, the cheesy crackers, this cereal, that cereal, you can reallocate a lot of that money. That's what I have done to kind of make my budget even out again a little bit. And I spend more on things like vegetables, fruit, meat, things like that.
Buying a cow.
And I'm and spending less money on these kind of just not so healthy, very addictive, snacky food. So that's one thought there about the snack thing.
Yeah, and I think a lot of this, this is back to the very beginning, not a got to thing, or don't be driven by guilt. There's a lot of mom guilt in how they feed their kids.
Yes.
If my kid even has a hole in his tummy, if I even think my kid's a little bit hungry, I need to make sure they're fed. I remember, kind of goes back to you when our kids were younger. Like you would express that to me. It's like, I can't stand when my kids are going hungry.
Well, I mean, not like they've ever gone actually hungry, but Right. No, you're so right. And there is a little bit, and this is all on the snacking thing, and we could probably do a whole podcast about this too, the mom guilt thing. And moms think about it, because there's nothing wrong with making cookies and blessing your children. I think it's wonderful. It's like one of mom's favorite things to do. It's a way to show love. Our children appreciate it. But if you're the kind of mom who's constantly throwing Pop-Tarts at your kids because they love it and it makes you feel better,
because they express a hole in their tummy,
do step back and think about, why are you really doing that? Because if they're eating a ton of food that is not good for their body, it's probably not helping them think straight, focus at school, hold still. I mean, we've got kids now who are dealing with constipation, kids that aren't sleeping well, kids that have skin issues, and a lot of it comes down to just an excess of these types of foods. Moms need to consider that. Like, it's like, okay, am I doing this to bless you, or am I doing it to bless me?
To fix my little
me
guilt,
feel better about whatever deep-rooted mom guilt
Snack
problems
guilt.
you have.
Yeah.
Exactly. So again, nothing wrong with blessing your children, making them cinnamon rolls in the morning. I mean, nothing wrong with that, but I think it's worth considering for sure. I think it's worth. A little more on this topic, and then we can move on to a couple more suggestions. Dinners, one thing that I would really, again, all under the threshold of trying to move more towards real food, trying to increase protein. I really encourage you to slowly move towards just kind of some sort of meat and vegetable at dinner. And one thing that I think is really helpful for people is you think in terms, as much as you can, even if you have a big family, of what I call transitional meals. These would be meals where you have your meat, you have your veggie, and then you have your carb, but they're separate. Yeah. So that the 16-year-old boy who just played 2 soccer games can eat as much rice with his fajita bowl as he wants, but maybe mom, who's dealing with some insulin resistance and rice is not going to benefit her health right now, she can still eat the meat, she can still eat the veggies, but not the rice, right? If you're always thinking like, this is a tater tot casserole or this is a lasagna where everything's all, kind of in one dish, as convenient as it is. And again, I understand why. That's what my mom used to do. 7 kids. It was just like, everything's in the pot and that's dinner. But if you can slowly start thinking about ways to kind of serve things separate, serve your macronutrients separate, even if it's as basic as like a baked potato, chicken thighs, some kind of vegetable. That way, look, that's a perfect example of a meal where it's all real whole food. You're dealing with potatoes are pretty cheap, and the people that potatoes serve can eat them. The people that they don't serve don't eat them. So I definitely suggest slowly moving that way. Make lists if you need to. Hop on Pinterest and shop meat sales, and then hop on Pinterest. That's another thing you can do. Literally go be like, what's on sale? Big hunks of meat, pork shoulder, whatever it is. If you've never heard of it, don't worry about it. Pinterest has a recipe for you. I promise.
And this is where husbands can be a big blessing to the wives is, get a barbecue.
Yes,
pit, get a barbecue grill, get a smoker.
Learn how to grill and buy your wife a crock pot and or a pressure cooker. Okay, if you haven't already done that, then what are you even doing? Okay, that's how you cook down cheap, tough hunks of meat. Is you cook it low and slow for 8 to 10 hours. That's a great hack for trying to work more protein into your life when you're not a millionaire.
Because we love. I mean, our kids love smoked food.
Oh yeah,
smoked pork shoulder or whatever, brisket, ribs. Yeah. Kids love the ribs. What they used to call the ribs?
Or do they have a name for them?
They had a name for them.
Oh, it's so cute. I don't remember. Yeah. Well, they've grown up. Our kids are very carnivorous. They've grown up on it. That's the key. A couple other thoughts. Another thing to just note, and we could do a whole episode on this too, is try to eat out less. That will save you money. And a lot of money. Yeah. And usually moms who are at home more, that's not an issue. Dads who go to work all day, eating out every single day will do some negative things for your health. If you are thriving and it's not an issue, then you can tune me out. But if you're dealing with health struggles or you're 30 pounds overweight or your doctor's like, things aren't good, stop eating out. And guess what, gentlemen? This is a thing. You can eat leftovers. you can do it, like whatever the steak and the asparagus that was for dinner last night,
you can have for lunch.
You can eat it again. And if you're unhealthy and if you're not rich, then you can't afford to not like leftovers. You just need to eat them. I can't believe how many wives I talk to who are like, my husband won't eat leftovers. And I'm like, are you serious? Get yourself some glass Tupperware. Pack some leftovers and take them to work for your lunch. Okay.
Well, and the one thing I've been doing about once a week for the last 3 months is had a protein shake for lunch, and
just
that's
like a good weight shake,
and maybe a cheese stick or something like that.
We'll talk about that when we talk about the man.
And that's helped, and it's helped you also. I can just easily skip lunch, and my lunch meeting maybe just turns into an office visit with me or something like that, as opposed to actually going out.
You don't have to go anywhere. Yeah. So eating out less, big time. It's a big player. And then lastly, let's just say one more before we move on to another thing. Ladies, making these slow swaps, these slow changes is going to require meal planning. and talk about the overwhelm. A lot of women really struggle with the concept of meal planning, but it is a skill you have to learn. I recommend picking a particular day of the week, like Sunday night, Saturday morning, whatever works for you, however you can time it with how you shop. You got to make a plan, because it's when you don't make a plan that the meat doesn't come out of the freezer, and then you call the husband and he brings home Panda Express. And I know you all know what I'm talking about. And I've done it too, but you have to
Orange
make
chicken's so
a
good.
plan. I know, you got to make a plan, and you got to just you'll learn slowly. All these things are skills. Yeah. You'll get better at them with time. But you will learn slowly the kind of meat, the kind of produce, the kind of whatevers you kind of just want to have around in your house at all times, so that if you're in a bind or, someone comes over or whatever, you've got some kind of fallback plans, And again, at first it might sound overwhelming, but a month goes on, another month goes on, you search Pinterest, you just print out the recipes that are good. Some will be awful. How many times?
We've got through, for the most part. You've been pretty well at
disgusting.
Adam, you've done pretty well at testing recipes, and you haven't failed.
I try to be discerning, when you're going through and you're like, well, that looks gross, but you never know. And sometimes you try something and you're like, well, never again. Don't print that.
There was
one.
No flavor in that.
Throw that one away. Yeah, it's okay, and it's okay to fail, and your family is still going to love you, and they're going to eat it, or they should. Yeah. And then save the good ones, make a binder, and you will slowly, the skill will grow. Your list of go-to recipes that are whole food based, that are protein centric, will grow. Okay.
Yeah, and don't be stuck on the plan either. Be ready to pull an audible if you need to pull an audible. The basketball game that night, whatever family situation. Husband has to work later than normal, whatever. But don't be stuck on the plan, but have it all figured out.
And that's the beauty of this. It doesn't mean you failed. Everybody has to do that sometimes. But the point is, what are we trying to work towards our norm being, right? We're taking that window and what kind of food do we normally eat? Right. And then whenever you do have to eat the Panda Express, you eat it, and it's not a big deal. Yeah. But there's a difference between that and that's what we eat all the time.
And this,
right?
I would say, this normal, this Overton window that we're talking about, it has to be established. If you haven't established it with your kids, you're young, you're gonna have a little more of a fight as your kids get older.
Yes, you are.
So it's better to kind of pick the food fights when you're younger with the kids. Yes. And that way it'll bless them with self-control later. So as mom grows in her abilities to cook and plan and do everything that you're talking about, it's going to be a lot easier to shepherd your kids through that process. There's all sorts of tips and tricks we can talk about with younger kids, but
a whole episode on kids,
on kids and food. But the big E on the eye chart is pick the food fights when they're 1, 2, and 3 years old, and use that as use that food fight as a way to love them in the long run. Sometimes it's a lot easier to feed your kid that snack when they're younger, because they're going to throw a fit. They aren't. It's easy to kind of feed them the problem when they're younger, but when it gets older, they're going to be more picky. So you want to deal with this when they're younger.
Yes, you do. Yeah. That can be a huge issue.
Yeah,
it's good. We should do an episode on that, because I have so many thoughts.
Yeah,
on the picky kids. Okay, I think we talked about that first point pretty well. And again, if you're going to take anything away from this conversation, that if every American would just do what we just talked about, move towards eating majority real food, no matter what it is, really, and got a little more protein centric with their meals, so many of our health problems would just completely go away. Yeah. And it's awesome, because that's so simple. But it really is, for some people, a huge lifestyle, huge paradigm shift. And all I can say is it's doable. And it just might be a slow journey. So,
And there's so much to unpack actually on that. You have, and we got about 10 minutes left, so we're going to,
we got to cover some other things.
But I just want to mention it here. You look at kind of the history of America and America's food consumption, and you look at the history of work in America, where everything was far more labor intensive until you got to about the 1940s and 50s, when you started industrializing things. And so there's a lot that's been kind of driven in the switch in how we work. I don't know if we want to go in much deeper in that, but for example, a lot of men were working a lot more labor intensive jobs before the 1940s. Now, a lot of men like me are sitting at a desk 8 hours a day.
Yeah, I think that's a factor.
It's a factor.
Yeah, I think that's a factor.
But all that is I think there's a lot of that shift driving snack culture. Even the kids would work on a farm all day.
Right.
Our food was different. Our food wouldn't be in a can, wouldn't sit in a can for a long time. Our access to kind of what you're calling whole food there was no refrigerators. So you had, everything was different. And now, so I think a lot of that kind of shift in the 30s, 40s, and 50s are kind of driven how we eat now as Americans and why maybe we have some of the health problems that we have now.
They're kind of new problems.
Yeah,
it's true. Right. I mean, I think that's true. Okay, a few minutes left. We already talked about the snacking. Yep. Stop it with the snacking. And and if you're an adult, if you have the need to snack all the time, you probably have some serious blood sugar regulation problems. And that, or you are just not eating enough protein and healthy fats at your meals. Okay. Right. Because adults, normal adults should not need to snack. And it is very, very healthy to give yourself digestive rest in between your meals. Okay. So I'm just going to say that if you're one of those people who's like, I got to have a snack all the time. And that used to be me. You've got some underlying issues there and you want to deal with that.
Okay. So you said it's either blood sugar or what?
Or you're just hungry because you're not eating enough protein.
And you aren't eating.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Okay. Yeah. Exactly.
Good baby.
Okay, another really great one moving towards health on the just for normal people on the exercise front is just start walking after your meals. Okay, walking is so underrated in my opinion. I think it's so magic in so many ways, especially with regards to its effects on your insulin. So especially if you're one of those people that you're like, my blood sugar is probably not well controlled. I probably am, pre-diabetic or whatever, which many Americans are. Simply just walking for 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 would be great, but you don't even have to go that long if you don't have that time. After your meals has an unbelievably profound effect on your blood sugar. It's so good. And there's so many cultures that's just built into their culture where everybody just the whole family gets out and just walks after their meals. And it's just a wonderful practice and you can do it pretty much anywhere. And it's something you could do all together. So that's phenomenal. And if postprandial, that's just fancy talk for after a meal, walking is, I think, best. But even if you can't always time it right, I know like in Idaho, for example, 50% of the year it's dark at 4. So it's like 4:30, midnight walk. That may not be, it may not work after dinner. Just try to get walking to be part of your life, even if it's 30 minutes a day. So mom, that might be just getting up at 7:30, dad kind of taking a little bit of a morning shift, you walking for 30 minutes in the morning. Dad, that might mean literally just walking during your lunch break. I mean, just fit it in. Now
I'll just say maybe one question here is usually the wives are probably walking all day.
Yeah, we've talked about that.
So would you say more walking? The dads I can see who's got a desk job like me. Okay, maybe I need to walk a little more and maybe mom just needs to maybe, I don't know, stretch and get some quiet time or something.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It totally depends on the season of life that mom is in. But and this is another episode that we should do. But moms do generally have a much more physical, active job than dad does if dad is working at a desk, right? Like your emails, phone calls, things like that. If dad's a welder, maybe not the same. But I am on my feet all day, laundry, cleaning, vacuuming, cooking. It's not a desk job at all. Right. So depending on your level of exhaustion, how physical your current season of life is, you may not need to get more steps. You might want to take that time and just do some at-home Pilates. Like, just YouTube it, find something. There's so much free information out there, ladies. Okay. And whilst getting a really good routine in a gym, getting some serious, like slow, heavy strength training is ideal. That's not always where you start, right? And you don't want to have that mindset of like, well, I can't do that, so I won't do anything, right? Like find a YouTube person. Again, so much free content out there. 15 minutes, work on your core. I've
thought about starting a YouTube channel where I just teach people how to work out.
Absolutely. Teach everyone everything that you know. And that's the missing piece here. So no, that's a really good point. Dads more often than not, just walking does a lot for them. And I already, another point was start some basic strength training. We already kind of touched on it. Just please don't think that just because you can't regularly be in a gym in a particular season of your life that you can't be doing anything. You can do little micro workouts. We'll talk about that also when we talk about the man plan, where you're just doing random sets of push-ups. You're doing random sets of squats throughout the day. You don't need a gym membership. You don't need to warm up. You don't even need to change your clothes. And actually, ladies, you can get very good at push-ups, pull-ups, things like that, doing these little exercise snacks, as they call them. And again,
exercise snacks. So we're for these kind of snacks now?
This kind of snack is okay. No. It's encouraged. It's encouraged. So just don't have that kind of mindset where you're like, well, I can't live the life of a fitness influencer at the gym every day, so I'll just do nothing. All right, don't do that. All right. How are we doing on time?
Oh, well, we can finish up the last two.
Okay, really good, really quick, kind of obvious, but drink a lot of water. A lot of people do not drink water. I know some moms who I swear, like they drink zero water all day long. Get a big old mug, get a straw. You'll drink more with a straw. And in terms of supplementation, I'm just going to touch on this a little bit, but especially if you're trying to unprocess your life in terms of the food that you're eating, you really should be taking some kind of an electrolyte, all right? Because for most Americans, most of the salt that we get in our diet is from processed food. So, and the lower carb you go, also, if you're going that direction, which a lot of people are and maybe need to for a little bit, your body dumps salt and dumps minerals in that process. So an electrolyte is really, really important. So make sure that you are replacing your electrolytes, not just drinking water, right?
So why is an electrolyte important for a stagnant guy like me?
Let's do a podcast on that later.
All right. This is just a tidbit of advice. We'll get into the deeper
we'll get into it
reason
later.
of that.
And then the last note I wanted to make is that do your absolute best to prioritize sleep. And, I know that when I look at a mom of 5 with a newborn and a toddler and I'm like, you need to sleep more. She's like, okay, that's really helpful.
Stop condescending me right now.
I would love to sleep more. So I completely understand phases of life, all of that, but do what you can, where you can, even if that means napping when your baby's napping, if that means talking to your husband about kind of splitting up nighttime shifts, if you're in the little baby zone, if you're pulling out of it, sometimes this means sleep training your kids, which just like the food fights can be a little bit of work at the forefront, but is 100% worth it and a blessing to everyone involved. One, kids start sleeping because we all need some REM. We all need some deep sleep, kids included. And just having good habits at night where you are leaning towards going to bed earlier, not later. Sleep affects everything. Everything. Health,
stress,
ability to lose weight, metabolism, cortisol. It affects everything. So really, really, and I'm sure we'll be talking, sleep's a big issue for a lot of people. So I'm sure we'll be talking about sleep in future, but put it at, at the top of your list in terms of priorities of trying to make those baby steps towards being healthier.
And I'll just want to actually in here, you just made me think of a couple things through the show and just in here that, the way God designed it, God designed dads to be the head of the house, to be responsible for providing, but God really gave the home to the mom. So it really is her domain and her job that God has given her. Of course, the husband delegates it to her, but he's only delegating because God said, like, it's the mom's responsibility for this. And so as you guys kind of talk about your food culture in your family, dads, you should be, leading that conversation, be, on the same page with your wife, because if you aren't on the same page with your wife, it could be frustrating, and you guys, why is my wife only doing this, or why are we not having this? This this is my favorite food, we never get it. What's going on? Kind of thing. And of course,
same page.
And the mom, as you do this, you want to feed your family in such a way you're blessing your family, and you're not being persnickety or frustrating your family because the food's all. I remember this is probably a bad analogy, but or a bad story, really backing this up. But we had this food co-op in Texas, and my mom would go buy the peanut butter there and buy all and it was like the worst peanut butter in the world. We hated it.
Like the natural, just ground up peanuts.
Yeah, it was basically just ground up peanuts right there. And with that peanut oil, and you got to kind of stir it in. But it was like it was nothing against you, Mom. You did a great job. But like that peanut butter was like the worst whole food peanut butter I've ever seen.
Gabe was traumatized.
I was traumatized.
He was traumatized by that peanut butter.
My point is like, as you work on maybe trying to adjust the Overton window in your family, do it in such a way where it's a blessing to your family. You don't want to, a great Bible verse in this, in Deuteronomy, it says, do not boil a kid in its mother's milk. In other words, don't take that which is meant to give life to kill your children, to kill your goat, to kill your kids. And so food's meant to give life. So don't use it in a way where it's like it's frustrating and destroying your family.
And you absolutely can do that. So no, that's a really good point.
Well, thank you for tuning in. If you guys want to be if you want to email us any questions, every episode, we're going to try to get to 1 or 2 questions. That's the goal.
We didn't really this time, but yeah, we'll try. We'll do it when we can.
And then some of the questions that you've already emailed us, we're actually going to turn into shows, so it won't show up as a question in the show and everything. So renchmedia@gmail.com. Make sure you follow my wife on Instagram, and you can follow me on Twitter at gmwrench.com or gmwrench on Twitter. So thank you for tuning in to Waterbreak, and we'll look forward to next time. Thank you, baby.
Thank you.